My name is Haley Bailey, and this is my presentation on social, emotional, and moral development in infants. We're going to start with an introduction. We're then going to cover social, emotional, and moral development. We're also going to talk about how these domains affect decision making, and we're going to end with a conclusion. Infancy is a stage of significant development in many areas. Three domains in particular are social, emotional, and moral. Many variables can affect growth in each of these domains. Additionally, these variables can affect infants' decision-making. The first area of development that we're going to be discussing today is social development in infants. As humans, we are all social animals, but to what extent varies among individuals. The first relationships that an infant makes helps to form who they are, who they become, and their understanding of the world around them. There are many different variables that can affect how an infant develops socially, but two of those we're going to be discussing today are temperament and attachment. Temperament is a child's unique way of approaching the world. A study by Thomas and Chess found that within a few days of birth, some children could be classified into one of three types of temperament, being easy, difficult, and slow to warm up. Infants with easy temperament may warm up to new situations, and others more easy than those with difficult or slow to warm up temperaments. When you know an infant's temperament, you can use that to encourage their strengths and support their needs. While a temperament can play a role in an infant's social development, there are factors that can affect temperament, such as genetics and an infant's environment. As mentioned in my previous slide, attachment is another variable that can affect an infant's social development. Some would refer to attachment as love and affection, but a more concrete definition would be an enduring emotional bond between one person and another. Attachment between an infant and a caregiver begins immediately after the child is born, and attachment is related to the quality of infant care. The type of attachments that an infant develops with those around them can affect their social development. The next area we're going to be discussing is emotional development. Infants learn to express both positive and negative feelings based on the reactions of those around them to their emotions, and daily activities can help promote emotional development in infants. By the end of the first year, two emotional reactions typically surface in infants, which are stranger and separation anxiety. Stranger anxiety is an emotional reaction that infants display, and it's a reaction of being weary when they confront someone they are not familiar with, someone they don't know. This usually occurs between 6 and 9 months, and all infants display some extent of stranger anxiety at around the same age, but the extent varies from child to child, which can affect their emotional development. And separation anxiety is a fearful reaction displayed by infants when their primary caregiver leaves them. This usually appears around 7 to 8 months. It peaks at around 14 months and then gradually decreases. And social referencing is an infant's response that's dependent on the behavior of those around them as they try to make sense of the world, and it usually develops around 8 to 9 months. And the last domain we're going to be discussing is in moral development for infants. Moral development in infants isn't as significant as the previous two domains we discussed because infants cannot understand morals outside of what feels right or wrong to them. However, infants are observing and learning from those around them, which is building a moral foundation. When these infants start to age into more of an early childhood age, they will start developing more of a moral capacity. The first stage of development can be labeled as Hieronymus morality by Piaget or preconventional reasoning by Kohlberg. Moral development contains both an interpersonal and an intrapersonal dimensions. Now that we have discussed how those variables can affect both social, emotional, and moral development, I will now discuss how those variables can affect an infant's decision making. Infants are learning from the people around them in their world, and each of these variables in some way is related to the interactions an infant is having with others. What they learn through these interactions will affect how they begin to make their own decisions. So in conclusion, today we talked about social, emotional, and moral development in infants and how variables that can affect those domains can affect their decision making. When we talked about social development, we talked about how an infant's temperament and the attachment they have with those around them can affect their social development. When we discussed emotional development, we discussed how typically by the end of the first year, infants develop separation and stranger anxiety, as well as social referencing and how those variables affect how they develop emotionally. And when we discussed moral development, we talked about how it doesn't occur in infancy. However, infants are still observing and learning from those around them, and that can affect their moral development later in life. And when we discussed decision making, we talked about how infants are learning from the world around them and how that can affect their decision making. So this is the end of my presentation. These are my references. If you have any questions, comments, or anything, feel free to leave them and I will answer them for you, sir. Thank you for taking the time to review my presentation. Have a wonderful day.